You are under arrest for impersonating a military officer and theft of government property. My own brother snarled as he slammed my face against the cold marble floor of our grandmother's dining room, his knee digging into my spine while handcuffs clicked around my wrists. The entire family watched in stunned silence as Detective Marcus Thompson, my younger brother, pressed my cheek against the polished stone where we had shared countless holiday meals. Grandmother's crystal glasses trembled on the table as I gasped for air, tasting blood from my split lip, unable to comprehend how the person I had protected my entire life was now destroying me in front of everyone we loved. 6 months before that devastating Sunday dinner, I was struggling to find my place in a world that felt foreign after 8 years of military service. My name is Alvina Thompson, and at 32 years old, I was learning that transitioning from Army captain to civilian life was harder than any combat mission I had faced in Afghanistan. My small one-bedroom apartment in downtown Phoenix felt cramped after years of military bases, and the silence at night was deafening without the constant hum of generators and radio chatter that had become my lullaby overseas. I had been working part-time at the Phoenix Veterans Counseling Center, helping other former service members navigate their own difficult transitions. The pay was modest, barely covering my rent and basic expenses, but the work felt meaningful in ways that civilian careers never seemed to match. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I wore my dress uniform to the center, not out of vanity, but because the younger veterans responded better when they saw someone who understood their struggles and had earned the right to wear those ribbons and insignia. My military service had taken me through 2 tours in Afghanistan as a military intelligence officer, work that I could never fully discuss with my family due to classification levels they would never understand. The weight of secrets I carried was heavier than any equipment I had hauled through desert mountains, but it was a burden I accepted as part of serving my country. My discharge papers sat in a folder in my bedroom closet documents that told only part of my story and left out the most important chapters. Marcus had always struggled with my military success, even though I had never flaunted it or made him feel lesser. Our parents, Robert and Sarah Thompson, had been proud of my service, displaying my promotion photos on the mantelpiece and bragging to neighbors about their daughter in the Army. This attention had created a rift between Marcus and me that I never intended, but one that seemed to grow wider with each passing year. He had joined the Phoenix Police Department 3 years earlier, determined to prove himself as a protector and public servant. His dedication to law enforcement was admirable, and I had always supported his career choice, attending his academy graduation and celebrating his first arrest. But somewhere along the way, his pride had transformed into something darker, a resentment that simmered beneath our surface conversations during family gatherings. The first twist came during one of our regular Sunday dinners at Grandmother Dorothy's house in Scottsdale. She was 84 years old, sharp as a tack, and had been the anchor of our family since my grandfather passed away 10 years earlier. Her Victorian-style home was filled with antique furniture and family photographs spanning 4 generations, a museum of Thompson family history. That particular Sunday in March, Marcus had arrived late and seemed agitated throughout the meal. While helping Dorothy clear the dessert plates, I overheard a conversation between them in her study that would change everything. She was updating her will and had decided to leave the house and most of her estate to me, specifically because of my military service and the sacrifices I had made for our country. Marcus was standing in the doorway when she explained her reasoning, his face growing pale as she detailed how proud she was of my dedication and how she wanted to ensure I had security after giving so much to others. I felt uncomfortable with the decision and tried to suggest she reconsider, but Dorothy was firm in her choice. She believed that military service represented the highest form of public service, and she wanted to honor that commitment. I did not know that Marcus had heard every word, or that this conversation would plant the seed of an obsession that would nearly destroy both our lives. As we left that evening, he was unusually quiet during our walk to the cars, his jaw clenched in a way that reminded me of our father when he was angry. I tried to make conversation about his latest cases, but he gave short, clipped answers before driving away without his usual goodbye hug. The next week, Marcus began what he would later call his investigation into my military service. Using his access to police databases and federal information systems, he started digging into my background with the thoroughness of a detective working a major case. What he did not understand was that much of my service record was classified at levels that required special clearance to access, and the information he was finding was intentionally incomplete and sometimes deliberately misleading. As a military intelligence officer, my work had often required cover stories and false documentation as part of operational security. The Marcus that remembered from childhood would have asked me directly about any concerns, but the detective he had become was convinced that systematic investigation was the only way to uncover truth. His growing suspicion poisoned every interaction we had, though I remained unaware of the storm brewing in his mind. The twist that would seal my fate came when Marcus discovered what appeared to be evidence of serious military misconduct in my record. A document he accessed through federal law enforcement channels suggested that I had been court-martialed for theft and impersonation of a superior officer, crimes that would have resulted in dishonorable discharge and potential federal prosecution. What Marcus did not realize was that these documents were part of an elaborate cover story created to protect a classified operation that was still ongoing. His discovery convinced him that everything about my military service was a lie, that I had been deceiving our family for years while wearing decorations and rank I had not earned. The brother who had once looked up to me as his protector now saw me as a criminal who had been manipulating our loved ones for sympathy and financial gain. The inheritance from our grandmother suddenly seemed like the ultimate prize I was stealing through fraudulent means. Marcus began planning how to expose what he believed was my deception, convinced that he was protecting our family from a con artist who happened to share their blood. The investigation that started with love and concern had twisted into something much darker, fueled by jealousy, resentment, and a dangerous certainty that he alone could see the truth hidden behind my military uniform. Over the following weeks, Marcus's obsession with proving my guilt consumed every spare moment of his life. He spent hours after his shifts poring over database searches, making phone calls to military administrative offices, and building what he believed was an airtight case against me. His apartment became a makeshift command center with printed documents and photographs spread across every surface, like evidence in a murder investigation. The irony was that while Marcus was becoming convinced I was a fraud, I was struggling with the very real challenges that faced legitimate veterans returning to civilian life. My nights were frequently interrupted by vivid nightmares about firefights in Kandahar province, moments when my intelligence work had put me in direct danger alongside infantry units. I would wake up in cold sweats, my heart pounding as phantom explosions echoed in my memory. The PTSD symptoms were manageable during daylight hours, especially when I was focused on helping other veterans at the counseling center. But the isolation of my apartment after dark brought back memories I was not yet ready to process. I had been seeing a therapist through the VA system, but progress was slow and complicated by the classified nature of many experiences I could not discuss even in therapy. My routine of wearing dress uniform to veterans events had become more important as a source of stability and identity. The familiar weight of the jacket, the precise placement of ribbons and insignia, and the respectful nods from other service members helped ground me when civilian life felt overwhelming. I never wore the uniform for personal gain or to impress anyone. It was simply a reminder of who I had been when my life had clear purpose and structure. During this time, Marcus was building relationships with contacts in military administrative offices, presenting himself as a concerned law enforcement officer, investigating potential stolen valor. His police credentials opened doors that would have remained closed to civilian inquiries, and clerks who should have questioned his authority, instead, provided him with limited information that seemed to support his theories. The false evidence that Marcus discovered painted a picture of a soldier who'd been caught stealing military equipment and impersonating officers to gain access to restricted areas. According to the documents he found, I had been arrested during a sting operation and subsequently discharged under conditions that prohibited me from wearing any military uniform or claiming any military rank. The paperwork looked official and detailed, complete with case numbers and legal references that would have convinced any reasonable person. What Marcus could not have known was that these documents were part of Operation Silent Shield, a classified counterintelligence operation designed to identify and prosecute a network of military personnel who were stealing and selling government property. My role in this operation required me to pose as a disgraced former soldier who was willing to participate in illegal activities, a cover identity so complete that it included fabricated military records that would support my credibility with criminal contacts. The success of Operation Silent Shield depended on the absolute believability of my cover story, which meant creating documentation that would fool even law enforcement officials who might investigate my background. Military intelligence had anticipated that thorough background checks might occur, and they had prepared accordingly by placing false information in systems that Marcus was able to access. Meanwhile, Marcus began subtly undermining my relationships with our extended family, dropping hints during phone calls and casual conversations that suggested I might not be entirely truthful about my military service. He never made direct accusations, but he planted seeds of doubt with carefully worded questions about whether anyone had actually verified my stories or seen official documentation of my achievements. His approach was methodical and patient, the work of someone trained in interrogation techniques and criminal investigation. He would ask our cousin Patricia whether she had ever wondered why I never talked about specific battles or unit assignments, or suggest to our Uncle Robert that it was unusual for someone with my claimed level of experience to be working such a modest job after discharge. These conversations created a subtle shift in family dynamics that I noticed but could not explain. People who had always been warm and supportive began asking more probing questions about my time in the military, requests for details that I could not provide without violating security protocols that remained in effect years after my return. Their growing skepticism felt like betrayal, though I had no way of understanding what was causing their changed attitudes. The second major twist came when Marcus contacted the military personnel office, directly identifying himself as Detective Marcus Thompson from the Phoenix Police Department and requesting verification of my service record as part of an official investigation. The clerk who took his call was bound by strict protocols about releasing classified information and could only confirm basic details like service dates and final duty station. When Marcus asked specifically about my rank at discharge and any decorations I had received, the clerk explained that much of my service record was classified and that she could not provide details without proper authorization from military intelligence. To Marcus, this response sounded like an evasion confirmation that there were serious problems with my record that the military was trying to hide. The clerk's inability to verify my claimed rank and achievements convinced Marcus that his investigation was on the right track. He interpreted her careful words as evidence of a cover-up rather than legitimate security protocols, and her suggestion that he contact military intelligence through official channels only strengthened his belief that bureaucratic obstruction was protecting a criminal. Marcus began preparing for what he saw as the inevitable confrontation, where he would expose my deception and protect our family from further manipulation. He convinced himself that my tears and denials would be proof of guilt rather than genuine confusion, and he prepared emotionally to remain firm in the face of whatever manipulation tactics I might employ when cornered. His partner, Detective William Burke, initially expressed skepticism about Marcus's theory, but gradually became convinced as the evidence mounted. Burke had his own reasons for supporting Marcus's investigation, reasons that would not become clear until much later, but his encouragement gave Marcus confidence that his conclusions were sound and his planned actions justified. The investigation had transformed Marcus from a loving brother into someone I no longer recognized, though I remained unaware of the change that was occurring. His growing coldness during family gatherings seemed like work stress or personal problems that he was not ready to discuss, and I tried to be supportive without being intrusive, respecting what I assumed was his need for space to work through whatever was troubling him. As winter turned to spring, Marcus finalized his plan for exposing what he believed was my elaborate deception. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would devastate our family and nearly destroy both our lives, all because the truth was hidden behind classifications that made my innocence impossible to prove and my guilt seem undeniable. By late spring, Marcus had convinced himself that he carried the burden of protecting our family from a master manipulator who had been lying to them for years. His investigation had uncovered what appeared to be clear evidence of military fraud, and he felt morally obligated to expose the truth before I could benefit further from my deception. The approaching birthday celebration for our grandmother seemed like the perfect opportunity to reveal my crimes in front of the entire extended family. Marcus spent weeks planning every detail of what he considered a righteous arrest, coordinating with his partner, Detective Burke, to ensure backup would be available when I inevitably became violent or attempted to flee. He convinced himself that my military training made me dangerous when cornered, and that he needed to be prepared for any resistance I might offer when confronted with irrefutable proof of my guilt. The irony was that while Marcus was planning my downfall, I was genuinely excited about the upcoming family gathering and the opportunity to honor our grandmother with the respect and ceremony she deserved. Dorothy's 85th birthday was a milestone worth celebrating, and I had been looking forward to spending time with relatives I rarely saw and sharing stories about the positive impact she had made on all our lives. I had decided to wear my dress uniform to the dinner as a gesture of respect for Dorothy, who had always been proud of my military service and had specifically requested that I wear it for her birthday photographs. The uniform represented the best version of myself, the disciplined and dedicated person she had helped shape through her love and guidance during my childhood. I wanted her to see me at my finest as we celebrated her long and meaningful life. The preparation for the evening felt like getting ready for a military ceremony, pressing creases until they were razor-sharp positioning ribbons with mathematical precision and polishing brass until it gleamed like mirrors. Each element of the uniform carried memories of achievements and sacrifices that had earned their place on my chest decorations that represented not just my individual accomplishments, but the collective efforts of every unit I had served with during my years overseas. Marcus's behavior in the days leading up to the dinner should have warned me that something was wrong, but I interpreted his nervousness and aggression as stress from a difficult case he was working. He snapped at our mother during a phone call about the menu, complained about the timing of the dinner conflicting with his work schedule, and seemed unusually interested in confirming that I would definitely be attending in uniform. His questions about my plans struck me as odd, but I assumed he was trying to coordinate his own schedule, or perhaps planning some kind of surprise presentation for Dorothy. The possibility that he was finalizing details for my public humiliation never occurred to me, because the brother I remembered would never have betrayed me so completely, even if he had serious concerns about my honesty. The extended family began arriving at Dorothy's house on Sunday afternoon, filling her spacious living room with conversations and laughter that reminded me why these gatherings were so important for maintaining our connections across generations. My Uncle Robert, who had served with the Army in Vietnam during the late 1960s, was particularly pleased to see me in uniform and spent several minutes examining my ribbons and asking about my overseas experiences. Uncle Robert's questions were more knowledgeable than those asked by other family members, reflecting his own understanding of military culture and terminology that civilians rarely possessed. He seemed particularly interested in my service in Afghanistan and mentioned that he had heard rumors about classified operations involving intelligence personnel, though he was careful not to ask for details that might be inappropriate for me to share. His comments created a moment of confusion that I would later recognize as significant, because Uncle Robert seemed to know more about my actual service than should have been possible, given the classified nature of much of my work. At the time, I attributed his knowledge to general familiarity with current military operations and his network of veteran contacts who might have shared information about ongoing missions. The third twist began to unfold during our pre-dinner conversations, when Uncle Robert pulled me aside and quietly expressed his pride in what he called my classified work, hinting that he understood I had been involved in operations that most family members would never learn about. His words were carefully chosen to avoid revealing specific information, but his meaning was clear enough to surprise me with its accuracy. I had never discussed the classified aspects of my service with anyone in my family, and Uncle Robert's awareness of details that should have been completely secret suggested that he had access to information through channels I did not understand. His comments made me realize that my service record might be more complex and politically sensitive than I had fully appreciated, even as someone who had lived through the experiences being discussed. Marcus had positioned himself near enough to overhear parts of our conversation, and Uncle Robert's hints about classified operations only reinforced his belief that I was involved in some kind of elaborate deception. Rather than questioning why a respected Vietnam veteran would validate my claims, Marcus interpreted Uncle Robert's words as evidence that I had successfully fooled even experienced military personnel with my convincing lies. The final setup for my arrest began when Marcus excused himself to make a phone call to Detective Burke, confirming that backup was positioned nearby and ready to respond when he gave the signal. He had coordinated the timing to coincide with the formal dinner, ensuring maximum impact when he revealed my alleged crimes in front of the assembled family members who had been deceived by my performance. Dorothy noticed the unusual tension in the room and decided to begin the meal with a moment of gratitude, asking me to say grace as the family member she was most proud of and the one whose service exemplified the values she had tried to instill in all of us. Her request put me at the center of attention just as Marcus was preparing to strike, creating the perfect stage for the humiliation he had been planning for months. Standing at the head of the table with everyone's eyes focused on me, I felt the familiar comfort of serving others and the deep satisfaction of honoring someone who had shaped my character through decades of love and guidance. I had no idea that these would be the last moments of peace I would experience for a very long time, or that the prayer I was about to offer would be interrupted by the most devastating betrayal of my entire life. Marcus positioned himself behind me as I began to speak, his hand already moving toward the handcuffs on his belt, while his partner confirmed readiness through his earpiece. The trap had been set with the precision of a military operation, and I was walking into it with complete trust in the people I loved most, never suspecting that my own brother was about to destroy my life in front of everyone who mattered to me. As I closed my eyes and began offering thanks for our family's blessings and grandmother's long life, Marcus struck with the vicious efficiency of someone who had planned every detail of the attack. His first move was grabbing my right arm and twisting it behind my back, using a control technique designed to cause maximum pain while preventing resistance. Before I could react or understand what was happening, his knee slammed into my lower back, driving me forward toward the marble floor of Dorothy's elegant dining room. "You are under arrest for impersonating a military officer and theft of government property," he snarled with a hatred I had never heard in his voice, before pressing my face against the cold stone with enough force to split my lip and scrape my cheek raw. The handcuffs clicked around my wrists as family members screamed and chairs scattered across the hardwood floor. The peaceful dinner transformed into a scene of violence and chaos that would haunt every person present for years to come. The accusations Marcus shouted while pressing his knee deeper into my spine felt like bullets tearing through my chest, each word designed to destroy not just my freedom, but my reputation and my relationships with everyone I loved. He listed charges that sounded official and terrifying, speaking in the authoritative tone he had learned during police academy training and refined through years of arresting actual criminals on the streets of Phoenix. According to the evidence I have gathered during a thorough investigation, Marcus announced to the horrified family members, "You have been fraudulently wearing military decorations you did not earn, claiming a rank you never achieved, and stealing government property for personal gain. The paperwork clearly shows you were dishonorably discharged for theft and impersonation, yet you have continued this deception for years while manipulating our family's emotions and finances." My grandmother's voice broke as she cried out for Marcus to stop hurting me, her words barely audible over my own gasping attempts to breathe with his full weight pressing down on my ribs. The elderly woman who had been celebrating her 85th birthday just moments earlier was now witnessing the arrest of her beloved granddaughter, accused of crimes that seemed to contradict everything she believed about my character and integrity. Our parents rushed toward us demanding explanations and trying to understand how their family dinner had become a crime scene, but Marcus warned them to stay back while he secured what he called a dangerous suspect. His training had taught him to control scenes through authority and intimidation techniques that worked effectively on strangers, but felt like psychological torture when applied to people who had loved and trusted him since childhood. The fourth twist came when I realized that the documents Marcus was referencing could only be related to Operation Silent Shield, the classified counterintelligence operation that had required me to assume the identity of a disgraced soldier. My mind raced through the implications of his discovery, understanding that he had uncovered my cover story without realizing it was fabricated for legitimate intelligence purposes rather than personal criminal gain. The devastating irony was that I could not defend myself without revealing classified information that would result in federal charges far more serious than anything Marcus was accusing me of committing. The security clearance I had maintained since my discharge specifically prohibited me from discussing operational details, even to save my own reputation or freedom, and violating those restrictions would endanger other operatives whose lives depended on the secrecy of ongoing missions. Detective Burke arrived within minutes of Marcus's call, bringing additional handcuffs and paperwork for processing what Marcus had described as a major stolen valor case. Burke's presence lent official credibility to the arrest and convinced family members that this was not just a personal dispute, but a legitimate law enforcement action based on substantial evidence of criminal activity. As they prepared to transport me to the police station, I caught sight of Uncle Robert's face and saw something that gave me a flicker of hope amid the nightmare unfolding around me. His expression showed concern and confusion rather than the shock and betrayal visible on other family members, suggesting that he might understand there was more to this situation than Marcus's accusations revealed. However, his inability to speak openly about classified matters meant that he could offer no immediate assistance or explanation. The emotional low point came when my grandmother approached, despite Marcus's warnings, her frail hands reaching toward my bloodied face, while tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered that she loved me and believed in my innocence, words that broke my heart, because I knew that my inability to defend myself would eventually convince even her that Marcus had been right to arrest me. The family members who had gathered to celebrate Dorothy's milestone birthday were now witnesses to what appeared to be the exposure of a massive deception that had been perpetrated by someone they had trusted and admired. Their shocked faces reflected a mixture of betrayal, confusion, and growing acceptance that the evidence Marcus presented must be accurate, because why would a police detective arrest his own sister without overwhelming proof of guilt? As Burke read my Miranda rights in the formal tone required by law, I made the decision to remain completely silent rather than risk revealing information that could compromise national security or endanger other intelligence operatives. This choice meant accepting the complete destruction of my relationships and reputation, sacrificing everything I valued to protect secrets that most people would never know existed. The transport to the police station felt like a funeral procession, with Marcus and Burke discussing the case in clinical terms, while I sat handcuffed in the back seat, staring through bulletproof glass at a city that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. Every familiar landmark reminded me of childhood memories shared with Marcus, moments when he had looked up to me as his protector and role model, making his current betrayal feel like a death that would never allow for mourning or closure. The booking process transformed me from a respected family member into a criminal defendant, with fingerprints and photographs that would become permanent records of this devastating day. Marcus observed the proceedings with satisfaction, convinced that he had successfully protected his family from a dangerous fraud, while I faced the reality that my commitment to protecting classified information had made my guilt appear undeniable to everyone who mattered most in my life. The holding cell at the Phoenix Police Department became my temporary home, while Marcus completed the paperwork that would formally charge me with multiple federal crimes. The concrete walls and steel bars felt familiar in an unexpected way, reminding me of temporary detention facilities I had seen overseas, but the emotional isolation was far worse than anything I had experienced during my military service. At least in Afghanistan, I had known who my enemies were. Marcus moved through the booking process with the efficiency of someone who had arrested hundreds of suspects, but there was a personal satisfaction in his manner that disturbed the other officers who witnessed his interaction with me. Detective Burke handled most of the administrative details, while Marcus made phone calls to federal contacts eager to report his success in uncovering what he believed was a major stolen valor case that had gone undetected for years. My decision to exercise my right to remain silent frustrated the public defender who was assigned to represent me, an overworked attorney named Patricia Gonzalez, who could not understand why I refused to provide even basic information about my military service. She reviewed the evidence Marcus had compiled and admitted that the documentation appeared to support the charges, making my silence seem like an admission of guilt rather than a legal strategy. The irony of my situation became more apparent as hours passed in the cell, because I was being prosecuted for crimes that I had actually helped prevent through my participation in Operation Silent Shield. The theft ring that Marcus believed I had been part of was the same criminal organization that my undercover work had helped identify and prosecute, resulting in the recovery of millions of dollars in stolen military equipment and the arrest of dozens of corrupt personnel. Marcus's call to the military liaison office triggered a series of events that he could not have anticipated, because the federal investigator who took his report immediately recognized the case numbers and operational details that Marcus was referencing. Instead of commending him for exposing a criminal, the investigator began asking detailed questions about how Marcus had obtained access to classified information and whether he understood the security implications of his unauthorized investigation. The fifth twist began when Colonel Sandra Williams, my former commanding officer, received an emergency notification about the compromise of Operation Silent Shield and the arrest of one of her most valued intelligence officers. Williams had been promoted to the Pentagon since my discharge, but she maintained oversight responsibility for ongoing operations that depended on the continued secrecy of my cover identity and fictional service record. Emergency meetings were convened at the highest levels of military intelligence as officials realized that Marcus's well-intentioned investigation had potentially exposed an operation that was still protecting undercover operatives in the field. The security breach was serious enough to require immediate intervention, but the complexity of the situation demanded careful coordination between military and civilian law enforcement agencies to prevent further damage. The real investigation that began in response to Marcus's arrest focused not on my alleged crimes, but on determining how classified information had been accessed through standard police databases and whether other operations had been similarly compromised. Federal security specialists began reviewing Marcus's investigative methods and tracing every database query and phone call that had contributed to his case against me. While these federal investigations proceeded, I remained in my cell unaware that powerful forces were working to resolve the situation, that my silence and commitment to security protocols had made impossible for me to address directly. The classified nature of my actual service meant that only a handful of people had the authority to declassify information that would prove my innocence, and those officials needed time to determine how much could be revealed without endangering other operations. Marcus spent the evening completing incident reports and preparing for what he expected would be a routine prosecution of stolen valor charges, crimes that typically resulted in plea bargains and community service, rather than serious prison time. His satisfaction with exposing my deception was tempered by the sadness of losing the sister he had once admired, but he convinced himself that justice was more important than family loyalty when someone had betrayed public trust so completely. Detective Burke encouraged Marcus's belief that he had performed exemplary police work, praising his thoroughness and dedication, while offering to assist with federal coordination as the case moved through the court system. Burke's enthusiasm for the prosecution seemed genuine, and Marcus appreciated having a partner who understood the difficulty of arresting a family member, even when it was clearly the right thing to do. The family members who had witnessed my arrest spent the evening in Dorothy's living room, trying to process what they had learned about my alleged deception and struggling to reconcile the violent scene they had witnessed with their memories of family gatherings where I had seemed genuine and caring. The evidence Marcus had presented was convincing enough to plant serious doubts about my honesty, though Dorothy continued to insist that something about the situation did not make sense. Uncle Robert remained notably quiet during the family discussions, offering neither support for Marcus's accusations nor defense of my character, but his silence seemed thoughtful rather than shocked. His military experience gave him insights into security protocols and operational requirements that other family members could not appreciate, and his questions about the specific charges suggested that he understood complexities that Marcus had not considered. The twist that would change everything came when Colonel Williams contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation to request immediate intervention in what she described as a case of mistaken identity involving a decorated intelligence officer whose service record had been deliberately falsified for national security purposes. Her call initiated a federal investigation that would soon involve multiple agencies and require coordination at levels far above local police authority. Meanwhile, I sat in my cell contemplating the complete destruction of my civilian life and wondering whether my commitment to protecting classified information had been worth the personal cost I was paying. The security protocols that had seemed so important during my military service now felt like chains that prevented me from defending myself against charges that could result in federal prosecution and permanent disgrace. The night passed slowly in the holding area with sounds of other arrestees and conversations between officers, providing a constant reminder that I was now part of the criminal justice system rather than the respected family member who had been saying grace at grandmother's dinner table just hours earlier. The transformation from honored guest to suspected criminal had occurred so quickly that I struggled to accept the reality of my situation. As dawn approached, the federal machinery that would eventually vindicate me was already in motion, but the officials who could clear my name needed time to navigate the complex security and legal issues involved in declassifying operational information. My fate depended on their ability to resolve the conflict between protecting national security and preventing the prosecution of an innocent person whose only crime had been serving her country with distinction and discretion. The morning brought unexpected visitors to the Phoenix Police Department as federal agents arrived with documentation that would transform my case from a routine stolen valor prosecution into a matter of national security requiring immediate intervention. Special Agent Catherine Rodriguez from the FBI presented credentials that commanded respect from local officers who had never encountered federal authority at this level, and her questions about Marcus's investigation suggested that serious mistakes had been made. Marcus was summoned to meet with Agent Rodriguez and Colonel Williams, who had flown from Washington overnight to address what she described as a critical security breach involving classified military operations. The confidence Marcus had felt about his thorough investigation began to evaporate as he realized that federal officials were treating him as a security risk rather than commending him for exposing military fraud. Colonel Williams began the meeting by explaining that Operation Silent Shield had been a highly classified counterintelligence operation designed to identify and prosecute a network of corrupt military personnel who were stealing government property and selling it through civilian channels. The operation required creating completely convincing cover stories for intelligence officers who would infiltrate the criminal organization by posing as disgraced former soldiers willing to participate in illegal activities. The documents Marcus had discovered were not evidence of my criminal activity, but rather proof of the thoroughness with which military intelligence had constructed my cover identity for the operation. Every detail he had found, from the falsified court-martial records to the fabricated dishonorable discharge papers, had been carefully crafted to make my undercover persona credible to criminals, who would certainly investigate my background before trusting me with sensitive information. Marcus's face grew pale as Colonel Williams explained that my real service record included multiple commendations for exceptional performance and a recent promotion that had been classified to protect ongoing operations. The stolen valor charges he had filed were not just mistaken, but potentially damaging to national security, because my arrest had exposed an operational identity that was still being used to monitor potential criminal activity in military contracting circles. The sixth twist came when Agent Rodriguez revealed that the theft ring Operation Silent Shield had been designed to expose included corrupt police officers who had been providing inside information to military criminals. Detective Burke Marcus's trusted partner, who had encouraged his investigation and assisted with my arrest, was actually under federal surveillance as a suspected participant in the criminal network that I had helped identify and prosecute. Burke's enthusiasm for prosecuting my case suddenly made sense when viewed through the lens of his criminal associations, because my arrest would eliminate an intelligence officer who posed a continuing threat to his illegal activities. His encouragement of Marcus's investigation had not been collegial support, but rather manipulation designed to remove someone whose undercover work had gotten too close to exposing his involvement with military thieves. The revelation that Marcus had been used as an unwitting tool by the very criminals I was working to prosecute added another layer of tragedy to the situation, because his genuine concern for his family's welfare had been exploited by someone he trusted as a partner and friend. The investigation he believed was protecting our relatives had actually been serving the interests of people who viewed both of us as obstacles to their continued criminal activity. Colonel Williams presented Marcus with declassification orders that authorized her to reveal enough operational details to prevent my prosecution while protecting information that remained sensitive for national security reasons. The paperwork included my actual service record, which showed a progression from enlisted soldier to commissioned officer to intelligence specialist, culminating in achievements that far exceeded anything Marcus had imagined during our childhood. My promotion to Brigadier General had been confirmed during a classified ceremony 6 months earlier, making me one of the youngest general officers in military intelligence and recognizing my contributions to operations that had saved dozens of American lives overseas. The rank and decorations that Marcus had accused me of falsely claiming were actually insufficient to represent my true achievements, because much of my service remained classified at levels that prohibited public recognition. The family reunion that followed my release from jail took place in the same dining room where I'd been arrested, but the atmosphere could not have been more different from the chaotic violence of the previous evening. Federal officials had provided Dorothy with enough information to understand that my arrest had been based on mistaken evidence, though the full extent of my actual service would remain classified for reasons of continuing national security. Uncle Robert finally revealed that his knowledge of my classified work came from his own continued involvement with military intelligence as a civilian contractor, a role that had given him access to information about current operations without the authority to intervene when he suspected that Marcus's investigation was based on misunderstandings. His silence during my arrest had been enforced by security protocols similar to those that had prevented me from defending myself. Marcus faced federal charges for accessing classified information without authorization and for compromising ongoing intelligence operations consequences that would end his law enforcement career and potentially result in prison time depending on his willingness to cooperate with federal investigators. The brother who had been convinced he was protecting his family now faced the possibility of losing his freedom because of his determination to expose what he believed was my deception. Detective Burke was arrested during the meeting as federal agents executed warrants based on evidence I had helped gather during Operation Silent Shield information that linked him to multiple instances of theft and corruption spanning several years. His manipulation of Marcus's investigation represented just one aspect of a criminal enterprise that had cost taxpayers millions of dollars and endangered military personnel who depended on secure supply lines overseas. The emotional reunion with my family was complicated by the need to maintain secrecy about aspects of my service that could not be revealed even to clear my name. But the federal intervention had provided enough information to restore their trust in my character and integrity. Dorothy's tears of relief and my parents' apologies for doubting me helped begin the healing process that would be necessary to repair relationships damaged by Marcus's misguided investigation. The truth about my service career was both more and less than what my family had imagined, because while I had achieved recognition and rank beyond their expectations, much of my work had involved dangers and sacrifices that they would never be permitted to fully understand. The balance between protecting national security and maintaining family relationships would continue to challenge me throughout my post-military life. 3 weeks after my arrest and subsequent vindication, the Thompson family gathered once again in Dorothy's dining room, but this time the occasion was a formal military ceremony, recognizing my service and sacrifice in ways that had previously been impossible due to security classifications. Representatives from the Pentagon had arranged for a presentation that would honor my achievements while respecting the continuing need to protect operational details that remained sensitive for national security reasons. Brigadier General Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer of military intelligence operations, had traveled from Washington to personally present decorations that I had earned but could not previously acknowledge publicly. The Bronze Star with Valor device recognized actions I had taken during a firefight in Afghanistan that saved the lives of an entire reconnaissance unit, while the Defense Meritorious Service Medal honored my contributions to Operation Silent Shield and related intelligence operations. The ceremony transformed Dorothy's home into an impromptu military venue with dress uniforms and formal presentations that demonstrated the respect and gratitude that my service had earned from the highest levels of government. General Hayes spoke about the unique challenges faced by intelligence officers, whose greatest achievements must often remain secret, and the particular courage required to maintain cover identities, even when personal relationships suffer as a result. My family members listened with growing amazement as General Hayes described accomplishments that I had never been permitted to discuss with them, operations that had prevented terrorist attacks and saved American lives in ways that would never receive public recognition. The gap between my modest civilian job at the Veterans Center and my actual military achievements was so vast that it took time for them to process the reality of who I had been during my years of service. Marcus sat quietly throughout the ceremony, his own legal situation still pending, as federal prosecutors determined whether his cooperation with the investigation into police corruption would be sufficient to avoid prison time. The brother who had once arrested me for stolen valor was now facing charges that could result in his own imprisonment, a reversal that highlighted the tragic irony of his misguided investigation. Dorothy announced during the ceremony that she was establishing the Alvina Thompson Veterans Scholarship Fund, an endowment that would provide educational support for children of military intelligence personnel whose service could not be publicly recognized. Her decision to honor my classified service through this scholarship represented her understanding that my greatest achievements would always remain hidden from public view, but that their impact deserved acknowledgement in ways that protected national security. The reconciliation with Marcus came slowly and required honest conversations about the jealousy and resentment that had motivated his investigation emotions that he was finally ready to acknowledge and address through professional counseling. His genuine remorse for the pain he had caused was clear, but rebuilding trust would require consistent effort over many years, proof that his apologies were backed by changed behavior rather than temporary regret. Marcus's cooperation with federal investigators led to the exposure of additional corruption within the Phoenix Police Department, resulting in multiple arrests and policy changes designed to prevent unauthorized access to classified databases. His willingness to accept responsibility for his mistakes and assist with reforms that would protect other families from similar experiences demonstrated growth that gave me hope for eventually restoring our relationship. The life lesson that emerged from our family crisis was that jealousy and resentment can destroy everything they touch, while truth and integrity ultimately prevail even when they seem weakest. Marcus's determination to prove my guilt had nearly ruined both our lives, while my commitment to protecting classified information had required sacrifices that almost cost me everything I valued most. My new position as Director of Veterans Services for the state of Arizona allowed me to use my military experience and leadership skills to expand support programs for former service members throughout the region. The work felt like a natural extension of my intelligence career, using strategic thinking and operational planning to solve complex problems that affected thousands of people rather than individual cases. Detective Burke received a 20-year federal prison sentence for his role in the military theft ring, while several other officers faced lesser charges for their participation in the corruption that had compromised law enforcement integrity. The investigation that began with my arrest ultimately resulted in the recovery of millions of dollars in stolen government property and strengthened security protocols that would protect classified information from similar breaches. Uncle Robert's role as a military intelligence contractor became an open family secret that explained his mysterious knowledge about current operations and his ability to provide guidance during my legal crisis. His experience bridged the gap between my classified service and my family's need to understand the context of my work, helping them appreciate the complexities of intelligence operations without violating security requirements. The healing process for our extended family included regular gatherings where we could celebrate achievements and support each other through challenges, rebuilding the trust and communication that had been damaged by Marcus's investigation. Dorothy's birthday dinners became annual traditions that honored not just her longevity, but the resilience of family relationships that could survive even devastating betrayals when people were committed to forgiveness and growth. Marcus completed his court-ordered counseling and community service while working as a security consultant for businesses that needed expertise in preventing internal theft and corruption. His experience with both sides of criminal investigation gave him unique insights into the methods used by white-collar criminals' knowledge that he channeled into legitimate work that helped protect other organizations from similar security breaches. The final resolution of our family crisis demonstrated that love and commitment could overcome even the most serious betrayals when people were willing to acknowledge their mistakes and work consistently to rebuild damaged relationships. Marcus's journey from jealous brother to remorseful ally required years of effort, but his genuine transformation proved that redemption was possible even after the most devastating mistakes. As I reflect on the lessons learned from this painful experience, I realize that the strength I developed through military service prepared me not just for combat operations, but for the personal battles that would challenge my civilian life. The discipline and resilience that intelligence work required became essential tools for surviving family betrayal and rebuilding relationships that seemed permanently damaged. The question that remains with me is how families can maintain strong bonds when careers require secrecy that makes honest communication impossible, and whether the sacrifices demanded by classified service are worth the personal costs they impose on relationships that matter most. Perhaps the answer lies in trusting that truth will eventually emerge and that love can survive even the most challenging tests when people remain committed to understanding rather than judgment. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? And how did you find the strength to rebuild that relationship? The journey from devastating betrayal to genuine reconciliation requires courage from everyone involved, but the rewards of restored trust and deeper understanding make the effort worthwhile. Please share your own experiences with family challenges in the comments below, and remember to like this story if it resonated with your own struggles with trust and forgiveness. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family conflicts and finding strength in the most difficult circumstances, and share this with others who might benefit from learning about the power of redemption and the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. Thank you for listening to this story about the complex relationships between duty and family sacrifice and love and the ultimate triumph of truth over deception. May you find the courage to pursue healing in your own relationships and the wisdom to balance personal loyalty with moral integrity in all your interactions with the people who matter most in your life.